Okay, so this week we've been talking about timelines and practicing using them to represent information in chronological order. So the standard for our lesson today is the order of significant events in Ohio and the United States can be shown using a timeline. So today I'm going to teach you a new reading strategy. This strategy will help you understand and relate to information that you read. It's called making connections. So making connections helps you to really remember information in an easier way by making it meaningful to your lives. So I'm teaching you this strategy because it will help you to make personal connections. This strategy will act as a tool that will help you to relate to information that you have read. When using this strategy, you will learn to make meaningful connections to the text, your lives, and the world around you. This will help you to see how such events have shaped your lives, making you a part of history. So today, we will be using the strategy of making connections to help you read and learn about how to create meaningful connections to events in Ohio and the U.S. by creating a timeline where you explain at least 5 events and how they relate to your life. So for this activity, you're going to be researching historical events in Ohio using either your computers, looking online, or in your books. And you're going to use these events to create a timeline explaining how each event relates to you. So can anyone refresh me on what a timeline is?
A timeline is a way to show how time has passed. So you put the events like in chronological order, in the order that they happened, on a line that usually goes across like horizontal, and sometimes you can use words or you can use pictures.
Right, exactly. So a timeline looks like this, and each tick mark represents a different time. And you can, like he said, usually have a date, and then you can either use words or pictures to describe each event. Good. So let's do a little example about making meaningful connections. So I want everyone to close your eyes. So a historical event that has been like a recent topic is the government shutdown of 2018-2019. So let's have a little discussion. So when I say and talk about this historical event, what are some connections that you can make? What are some connections that you can make? I can give you an example. So when I think about the government shutdown, I think about how my family was preparing and planning for a vacation, and we were wondering if the airports would be open so we could go on our trip. So I'm going to write 2018 or 19, and make sure you just write what the event is. And then I said vacation, airport. What are some other connections that you think that you can make?
Ooh, this kind of really relates to what you were talking about. My mom works at the airport, and during the shutdown, she still had to go to work even though she wasn't getting paid.
Right, so exactly. So your mom works at the airport, and she wasn't sure that with the government being shut down if she would get paid. Right, exactly. That is great. So now I have just used this information to create my timeline. So since this is a recent event that has happened this year, it goes on the far right side because you go from left to right. Left is the events that happened the farthest away, and on the right are the most recent events. Does everyone understand? Thumbs up? Great, exactly. So these are some really good connections that we came up with. So do you see how this makes information more relevant to your own lives? You're able to make connections?
Yeah, I like this because we see how things relate to what we remember, what was going on when that event happened.
Right, exactly. So now I need to complete my timeline. So since I'm older than you guys, some of my events are going to start back further than yours. So my first event on my timeline is going to be in 2001. And in 2001, on September 11th, 9/11 occurred, which was a terrorist attack in New York on the Twin Towers. And something that I remember from that time was I was in school, and over the PA system, they announced that we were going home. They wouldn't tell us anything, but we just knew we were coming home. So I came home, and we turned on the TV, and I was watching the news and seeing the planes hit the tower and everything. So that's my personal connection. So under 9/11, I'm going to say sent home. I'm going to write some of my connections. Sent home from school, news, the plane hit the towers. So, after I completed my timeline of events that happened in my life, this is what it would look like. So in 2005, Hurricane Katrina hit. That was in Louisiana. It was one of the worst hurricanes. I remember hearing about how bad it was and how it completely wiped out families and their homes. And in school, we actually made care packages to send to the families with belongings, and we collected canned foods and stuffed animals to send to the shelters, and we wrote letters and drew pictures too. In 2008, the stock market crashed. I remember everything being really expensive, and it affected a lot of families, and my family was really worried about money and hoping that we would be able to get through it. In 2009, Barack Obama was elected the 44th president. This really made history. He was the first African-American man to become president, be elected. So there was a lot of celebration about diversity, and it was a first for the United States. And then in 2012 was the Chardon shooting, school shooting. I remember I was sitting in the library with my friends, and we heard about it. We were checking social media, and we were really worried. I had one friend that actually had friends that went to Chardon, so we were worried about them and just wondering what had happened. So, now that we have talked about my events, it's your turn. So during this time, you will be researching historical events online, on your computers, or in your textbooks to create a timeline just as I did. Underneath each event, so you need a year and an event name, just like I did, you will explain the significance to your own life or how it relates to you. This can be a memory or a story, as long as it's a connection that you can make to the event. When you finish, you can turn and talk about your timelines with your classmates. But remember, you are making connections from events either in Ohio or the United States to your own life. This will really help you to remember what you read, either online, what you researched, or in your textbook, and help you relate to experiences that you've had. This is going to make it easier for you to understand the information. So I'll give you some time, and then we'll discuss them afterwards. What was one of the events that you chose?
Well, I was going to write about Donald Trump becoming the 45th president, but our book is older than that, so I went on my computer and I found out some things about, that he was elected as our president in 2017, and I remember going to bed the night before thinking that we were going to wake up and have our first lady president, that Hillary Clinton was going to be president, and everybody was so surprised when we found out that Donald Trump was the one who was elected. But I found that on my computer because I couldn't find it in my book.
Right, that's a great connection. Yeah, good job. Yeah, I like that you put the event and the year, and you have listed some of the significance that you can relate to. Okay, since I've given you about 20 minutes, everyone looks like they're finished with their timelines. Let's come back together and let's share our timelines. Does anyone want to share their timeline? Okay.
Here's mine.
Okay, and when you are explaining your timeline, make sure you give the year, the event, and how it relates to you.
Okay, so one of the first things that I put on my timeline that I can remember is, I remember you talking about Hurricane Katrina, and I remember that there was another hurricane named Sandy, and I have a cousin named Sandy, so I remember that name, and I also remember that hurricane took place up around New England, like Massachusetts, Connecticut, New York, and I was really worried because I have cousins who live in Massachusetts right near the ocean, so I was worried about them when I saw all the damage that was being done. Then another event was also dealing with my cousins up in Massachusetts. I was really worried when I heard about the bombing that took place at the Boston Marathon in 2013, when a bomb went off and people were injured, and that was just like right around the area where my cousins live.
Right, that's a really good connection, a way to really remember it. Good.
And then in 2014, I remember that there was this disease going around that was killing people called Ebola. And I remember hearing that some guy flew from Texas on a plane and he was infected with Ebola and he flew into Cleveland, and all of my friends and I, we were so worried that we were all going to get sick and die from Ebola.
Right, exactly.
And I already talked about President Trump with you, how we were so surprised because we thought we were going to have a lady president and we had President Trump the next morning.
Right, he was elected in 2017.
And then just this past year in 2018, I remember watching all of the fires on TV, and we even talked about it in school, and we prayed for them in my family and at church. The people who were affected by the wildfires in California, because there were a lot of movie stars and famous people who lost their houses, and a lot of the trees in the national parks were all burned down.
Right, exactly, yeah. So these are some really great connections. So do you see how when we make personal connections, it really helps you to relate information to what you have read?
Yeah, it makes it much easier when you relate it to stuff that you remember. Whether you look it up online or in a book, and if you can relate it to something that happened in your life, it really makes a lot more sense.
Right, and using a timeline even makes it more, like, you're more able to understand it better because you can visually see all the events and how they have occurred.
Right, it makes me feel like, wow, like I'm a part of history now, and I can see these events, how they've happened and how they've shaped my life.
Right, yeah, they've shaped and affected, you know, your life, the world around you. Based on what you've read, you can even make connections to what you've read, your own life in the world. Exactly, right.
So I like looking up things online, and in my book, I feel like I can better understand like what happened in the United States through all these years, because I can relate them to personal things in my life, and it makes it easier to understand and to develop meaning with things like this in history.
Exactly. So making connections really does allow you to make information come alive in your own life, and it definitely makes it more relevant, right?
Right. I really like making connections.
Right. You guys did a great job. Good job today. Good job.